Hey y'all, it's Chris and welcome back to Creative Loops. This is my channel where I explore all things yarn, crochet, and sometimes knit. And in today's video, we will be doing part 2 of my crochet robe tutorial. If you missed that video, check out part 1 and come back to this video when you're ready. If you're watching this in late December or 2026, all of the parts are available, so check out my channel for the full playlist of the crochet robe tutorial. By the end of today's video, you will have everything you need in order to finish the main body of the robe. Once we start part 3, we will be going into the hood and the moss stitch lining here. So stick around, stay tuned. We are knocking this project out and I hope you're enjoying it. Again, this is my first full crochet tutorial, so please leave me your feedback in the comments below. Be kind, but let me know how I can do better next time. Let's get into it. Now would be the perfect time to revisit your sizing. I noticed as I started the body of my robe that the size I have listed here for the neck is not accurate. I doubled the number that I have. So instead of 8 inches, I should have a size here that lists 4 inches. So please go through your sizing and double check the accuracy. Keep in mind that you will want to build in positive ease. What that means is that the sizes you have for the garment will be bigger than your actual body size, and this is just so that the clothing is not too tight when you put it on. For garments like a robe, which is supposed to be pretty oversized, you'll want to build in quite a bit of positive ease. I like to add a full inch to 2 inches on all of the width measurements. So I won't add anything to the length. So for example, the arm length and the overall robe length, I want to keep those measurements accurate because I don't want those to be too long, otherwise they'll be hanging all over my hands or dragging on the ground. But the width, so how wide the robe is and how wide the arm is important because we want to make sure that it fits over other clothing that you have on, if you're wearing this over other clothes, or if you just want to have it hanging loosely over whatever you're wearing. So make sure that you're adding the positive ease, so adding 1 to 2 inches to the width of the arm and the overall width of the robe. Welcome back. Now you should have reached the point where you've added all of the rows you need to the sleeve. You'll notice here that the beginning of the sleeve is a little more narrow than the rows that you just added on. That's because of how the treble crochets are pulling the work together. Those will loosen up over time, so please don't worry about how it's looking. It will give it the more robe-like look, but those stitches will loosen over time. Your last row should have been with your base color. We're going to continue using the base color though, so I'm starting with a slip knot, and I'm going to add this yarn back to my hook because what we're going to do is our final row on the sleeve. We're going to add the yarn using a half double crochet. So we're going to start off here with a standing half double crochet, which I have the yarn on my hook. I'm yarning over and I'm going into a stitch. It doesn't matter what stitch. I'm going into a stitch, yarning over, pulling through, yarn over, pull through again. So that is a standing half double crochet. You can start off with just a chain 1 and then do a half double crochet into your first stitch. I'm going to go around the entire opening of the sleeve and do half double crochets into every stitch. You do that by yarning over, go into the stitch, yarn over again, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through all 3 loops. That's how you do a half double crochet. So we're going to continue doing that all the way around the opening of the sleeve. So we're going to yarn over, go through the stitch, yarn over and pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through all three, yarn over, go through the stitch. There we go. So we're going to continue doing this half double crochets all the way around the opening of the sleeve. We're now coming up on our first stitch here. So we're going to continue these last few half double crochets along the sleeve until we can get to our first stitch here. So you see the tail of that first stitch. So continue doing these half double crochets, and I will meet you at the end of this row where we will slip stitch to this first stitch. We're closing out this final half double crochet. Now we can see the standing half double crochet is in this other stitch, so I'm going to go under that V and do a slip stitch to join these two together and close this row out. Now that I've joined this together, I'm going to cut this off, leave a tail to sew in, pull through the yarn, and there we go. This is the end of our sleeve here. I'm going to weave in these ends and we are done with our sleeve. I finished weaving in that first tail. I still have a tail here, but as you can see, now this edge is complete. So I want to get on to the next part of this tutorial. So we're going to move on from the sleeve for now. We're going to tuck this in. I'll take care of this tail later. We're going to see what this looks like finished. This is the finished sleeve now with the additional rows added on to make it long enough. You'll want to make sure that you've done this to both panels. So we have our first and our second panel. Both panels should look exactly the same now. We have both sides. The next part is adding on the width. So we already have a certain width here. We're going to continue to add on rows that will make it wider, but what we want to do is make sure that we're creating room for the neck. Taking a look at our measurements again, we see here that my overall width I want is 24 inches. When we look at the width that I have already for the arms, it's 11 inches. That means I already have 11 inches on both sides of my robe because we have 11 inches on both sides of the garment that we've already created here. So that's already a total of 22 inches. You'll notice that for my neck, I want 4 inches. 22 minus 4 is already 18 inches. So my overall width is already bigger than what I would typically want it to be in order to fit me just right. For the tutorial that I'm doing here, I'm going to show you how to add on some more width before we start making room for the neck, which this will make a bigger garment for me, but for anyone who is following along on this tutorial who has not reached their desired width yet, this is an important part part of the process. We don't want to start creating the neck opening too soon, otherwise the garment will start to slide off of your shoulders. We want to make sure that that neck opening is just right, and if you need to add on more width before you get to that neck opening, we'll want to make sure that we do that. For example, if your width is, let's say, 30 inches and your arm width is still 11 inches, right now you have a total of 22 inches in width. If we deduct 4 inches from that 30-inch width that you want, we'll want to continue working up until we get to 26 total inches wide, and then start working on the neck opening. So if we're working for a 30-inch width, we would want to add on an additional 2 inches on each side in order to get to 13 total inches before we start working on the neck opening. Don't get too scared, but I want to do some math with you, just so that we can visualize this together. Right now we have our arm width at 11 inches. So when we times that by 2, it comes out to 22 inches. Now, in my example I gave you of a total 30-inch width, we would need 15 inches on both sides in order to come out to 30 inches. The neck that we need is 4 inches. So if we take 4 inches out of 30, we come up with 26 inches, which means we will need 13 inches on each side before we start working on the neck. Now, coming back to our robe here on one side, this is the edge we're going to be working along. So we're going to be working along the front and back edge and the bottom edge. This is technically 3 different sides that we're going to be working along. So if you remember, we started off the hexagon with 6 sides. Now that we've seamed the sleeves together, we have 3 sides to work on. We're going to do these rows as joined rows. I have my yarn on my hook. I'm going to join at the top seam here. Because these are joined rows, you can actually join wherever you want, but this is where I like to keep my seam. So I'm adding the yarn with a standing double crochet, going through this leg here, pulling up another loop, yarn over, pull through both loops. That is my first stitch. Now I'm going to do a double crochet cluster here, so I'm going to add 2 more double crochets to create my 3 stitch cluster. I'm moving on to this next opening here, doing a double crochet. Now I'm doing a front post treble, so yarning over twice, going down to the cluster below, wrapping around that middle double crochet, pulling up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through. Next is my last double crochet to close out this cluster. I'm going to continue to do this all the way around all 3 sides. So I'm going to do my front post treble crochets, then I'm going to do my double crochet to close out this cluster that I'm already working on here. With how big this is getting, it's getting a little challenging to keep it in frame, but we are rolling along here. We're going to do our first double crochet of this next cluster. We're going to do our front post treble around the front post treble of the row below. We're going to pull through 2, pull through 2, pull through 2. Our last double crochet here. So each of these clusters, as a reminder, consists of a double crochet, a front post treble crochet, and another double crochet. So it is 3 stitches in each cluster as we go around. Once you get to the corner, we'll come back and do a refresher on what we do at each corner. So I'm going to keep going around now, and I will meet you at our first corner. We are now almost to our first corner, so I'm going to do my next cluster here, double crochet. We're going to do a front post treble around that middle stitch in that cluster below. We're going to do another double crochet. And now going into the corner, we're just doing 3 double crochets in a double crochet cluster. So this is my second double crochet, my third double crochet, and then we're going to chain 2, 1 and 2, and now we're going to do another cluster. So we're going to do 3 double crochets into this corner. As we're working our way around, we're going to have 2 corners here. So this is our first corner. We're going to have 1 more corner before we work our way back up and close out this row. We are now at our last front post treble crochet cluster that we can do. There is 1 more double crochet cluster below, so I'm going to do a double crochet, front post treble crochet around this middle double crochet in the cluster below, yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, and close it out with 1 more double crochet. Now we're at the chain 2 space, and I'm just going to do a 3 double crochet cluster in here. So 3 double crochets into 1 cluster. Here's a third double crochet, and now I'm going to slip stitch to this first stitch and close out this row. If I can get this hook in, pull through. I'm going to cut off this yarn tail. Now and pull the yarn through completely, and this closes out this first row. So this is what we're going to do until we get to the 13 inches around that we need for our body width. I'm going to weave in these tails, and I'll be back. I am back now with my base color. I'm going to do a slip knot, and I'm going to add my yarn to my hook. Now, making sure that you're on the wrong side of your work, you're going to join the yarn. Again, this row, so the base color row, is always going to just be double crochet clusters. You will join your yarn either with 2 chain stitches or with a standing double crochet stitch, which is what I'm working on right now. Gonna go through this leg here, yarn over and pull through a loop, yarn over, pull through both loops. There's my first stitch. We're going to work 2 more double crochets into this same opening. So we're gonna yarn over, we're gonna go through this opening, pull up a loop, pull through 2. I like to try and weave in my ends while I'm stitching. So what I'm going to do here is pick up this tail, and I'm going to actually yarn over both of these. I'm going to basically crochet with both strands of yarn for this one. I'm going to pull that tail through, and then I'm going to take care of that when I get back to the end of the row. So I'm going to continue forward with my double crochet cluster here, which is 3 double crochets into this opening. And we're going to continue to do this all the way around with each opening into the row below. So basically, again, we're going to do 3 double crochets or 1 double crochet cluster between each cluster of the row below, all the way around until we get to the end of our row, and then we're going to slip stitch and close these rows together. We've made it to the end of our row. I'm going to do my final double crochet cluster into this last opening here. 1, 2, and 3. I'm going to go into this first stitch. I'm going to yarn over and pull through all of the loops on my hook, and then I'm going to cut this off and pull the entire tail through. And we have finished this second row. I'm going to weave in this tail, and I'll be back to tell you what to do next. Coming back, we now see what we're going to do is we're going to continue to make this wider. So we're going to continue to add on rows until we get to that 13 inches in this case for the example, or whatever the half measurement is for your total width minus the neck. We want to make sure that we're leaving room for the neck so that we can add an opening there and it won't be too bunched up around the back of our neck. Here I've added on a few more rows. You'll see here that I did the treble crochets into those stitches there. Here we have one side that's finished. I added on 2 more rows basically to get to the 13 inches that I need. And now we're going to focus on the neck. So we need to do some more rows to build out the neck opening. As you can see here, so we have both of our panels and they both measure the 13 inches, so we have a total of 26 inches, which means we just need 4 more inches to get to the 30-inch width that we need for the expanded example that I'm doing here. I'm going to grab my measuring tape so I can show you here that if we need 4 more inches, we're going to want to make sure we do 2 more inches on both sides. The rows that we're going to add on now are rows that are going to be open. So we're not going to close the rows with a slip stitch once we get to the end of the row. Let me grab my yarn and start showing you. This is also the point where I find it super helpful to start adding my stitch markers. So this helps you indicate what side is the back. This is the first time that you are going to start making sides that aren't symmetrical. And I say that knowing that we're about to actually keep it symmetrical, but in order to make sure you're joining in the right place, you'll want to make sure that you know what side is the back and what side is the front. I'm adding my stitch markers behind this center stitch here. So you'll see here's the seam on both sides. I find that center stitch and I'm adding the stitch marker behind that center cluster, I should say. I'm going to set aside my one side and I'm going to work on only one side of this garment. I'm going to need to actually turn this around so that I'm working on the right side of the garment, and I'm going to join my yarn at this stitch marker. I'm going to do my standing double crochet, go through this leg, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through both. I'm going to do my front post treble into the stitch below. My last double crochet, pull through, yarn over, pull through, work with that tail later. And I'm going to continue to go through. I'm moving my stitch marker because this is now my last stitch in the back. This is my last cluster in the back, I should say. And now I'm going to go all the way around doing these front post treble clusters, doing basically the same thing I was doing for the rows below, but once we get to the end, we are not going to close the row. We're going to leave it unjoined. So we're not going to join it at all with that slip stitch. So let's continue to work our way around. I'm going a little bit faster now because we should be into the swing of things. Close this out. I'm going to do one front post treble, pull through, pull through, pull through, and close out with a third. One more double crochet, front post treble. I'm going to do the double crochet, and I'm just going to keep working my way around. Now that I'm at the end of my row here, I just want to show you how I'm ending this row. So I'm going to do my double crochet, I'm going to do my front post treble crochet below here, pull through, one more double crochet, and like I said, we're not closing the row, we're not joining it together. So I'm going to do 2 chains, 1, 2, I'm going to cut my yarn, leaving a tail, and I'm going to pull this through into a knot. So I'm going to pull tight, squeeze that down, and knot it. And I'm going to weave this end in. So this is how I'm ending the row. I'm not joining. That's it. Let's weave in these ends. Now I just want to show you what it looks like to add on the base color. So we're on the wrong side of our work. I'm going into that first stitch of the cluster for the color below, doing my standing double crochet here, or you could do a chain 2 to start the row. And I'm not going to work anything else. Instead, I'm going into this opening. I'm going to do a cluster in the opening. So there's going to be a gap here. You want to make sure you're leaving this gap because you're going to do a front post treble cluster into that gap when you do the other row. It's important that you're not missing that first opening, otherwise your garment's going to start looking distorted. So we're going to keep going through here and doing these double crochet clusters into each opening around the 3 rows, the 3 sides that we have here. 2 and 3. We're going to do 1 double crochet, 2 double crochets, and 3 double crochets. We're going to keep doing this again all the way around until we get to the end. We're not joining our rows, so we are not going to slip stitch to the first double crochet that we created at the beginning of this row. Let's keep working our way around and I'll meet you at the end. Okay, we're at the end of the row here. I'm going to do my final stitches. So I'm going to do a cluster in this opening here. 1, 2, and 3. And now we're at the stitch marker, so we know this is the back of our garment, the back of the piece. We're going to do 1 more double crochet into that very first stitch. So this is the very first stitch of that treble crochet cluster, and this creates that opening gap, that gap where we're going to do one more treble crochet cluster when we do that next row. We're going to chain 2, 1 and 2. We're going to cut our yarn, and we're going to pull it all the way through. Just pull that knot, pull that down with our nail here, and this is the end of our row. I want to show you what the neck opening is starting to look like. When we move our piece around here, get this tail out of the way. So this is what our first 2 rows are looking like for that neck opening. So you see here, it's creating this opening where we have clear front and back openings. So this is going to be the front flap, and then this is going to be the back side that we seam together. I'm going to add on another color here. We're going to do a double crochet into this very first stitch. So I'm going to do a standing double crochet. You can do a chain 2. This yarn over, pull through these 2 loops that I have. I'm going to go through that first bar there, pull up a loop, pull through 2 loops. So I have my first stitch. I'm doing my treble, front post treble now. So I'm going down around that treble below. I'm going to take the stitch marker off. So I'm going to yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. So that's my front post treble. And now I'm going to do my double crochet to close out this cluster. I'm going to put the tail in here too. So I'm going to pull through both of those strands and pull through, pull up the tail so I can deal with that later. And that is my first treble cluster. I'm going to put my stitch marker into this first stitch that I have here, because that is where I am going to make sure I put my last stitch for my base color when I do that next row. Now I'm just going to work my way around. So again, this is very similar to what we've already been doing. So when we were adding on the rows for the sleeve, when we were adding on those additional rows around the body, now we're just adding on more rows, but we're leaving the opening for the neck. So we're not joining or closing these rows when we're done with them. And we're going to keep doing this until we add on those 2 additional inches for me, or however many additional inches you need to create that neck space. And once we're done with that, we're going to come back because we will be ready to join the back together. We have both of our panels done, both sides done. So here's the front, here's the back. We're going to start seaming the back together. We've gotten 4 inches total, so 2 inches on both sides to make our neck opening here. And now we're going to start putting these together. This is where the stitch markers come in handy. So I'm going to take both sides here, pick up this one side. I'm going to move this around. Now making sure that my 2 back sides are touching. I'm going to go down here to the 2 chain 2 spaces. I'm going to grab my base color. So we want to make sure we ended on a row with our base color. I'm going to grab my base color, make a slip knot, put it on my hook, and we are going to join the yarn through these 2 chain 2 spaces. So go through both of the chain 2 spaces with a standing single crochet. So I went through, picked up a loop, yarned over, and pulled through both of those loops. We're going to do slip stitches into the front and back loops of the rows. So similar to how we joined the sleeves. So looking at each of these stitches here, we see that we have a front loop, we have a front loop here and a back loop, and then we have another front loop and a back loop. We're going into so here's the back loop of that back row. So we're going to go through these back loop stitches and these front loop stitches here. So I'm going to put the yarn back on my hook. I'm going to start doing slip stitch joins. So pick up that front loop, pick up that back loop, yarn over, pull through both loops. We want to make sure we're keeping the tension a little loose because we don't want these slip stitches to be tighter than they already are. We're going to go through, we're going to keep doing that. We're going to go through that front loop in the front and the very back loop, yarn over, pull through both, front loop, back loop, yarn over, pull through both, front loop, back loop, yarn over, pull through both, front loop, back loop, pull through both. So we're going to keep doing this all the way down. Again, this is the exact same thing that we did for our sleeve. So when you look at it, each of these clusters should actually be touching. So you should be pairing each cluster with the other cluster on the other side so that they create this look where they're seeming attached. And on the right side, you can see that the yarn is, the join is invisible, but when we're looking at the wrong side, so again, please make sure you're doing this on the wrong side of the work. So, but the wrong side is facing you and facing away, and the right side of the work is touching each other on the inside. So the slip stitch join will be on the inside of your work once you're done and you're looking at it. We're going to keep going down. I think I might have skipped a stitch here. Let me see. No, I did not. Yeah, no, I didn't skip a stitch. So we are going to, I'm going to do this cluster again. Front loop, back loop, yarn over, pull through. I'm going to do the front loop, back loop, yarn over, pull through, all the way down. And again, I know I've said this, but similar to how we seamed up the sleeve, we're just going to keep going through and seam up the back here, joining it all together. Make sure you're keeping those slip stitches a little loose because you don't want it to bunch up in the back. If you tighten those slip stitches too much, the back is going to be bunched. And you don't want it to do that. You don't want it to start to look like it's bunching up. It is okay if it comes to a little bit of a point right where that seam is at the bottom, because we're going to add more rows to the bottom of the robe to make the robe long, and it's going to pull that down a little bit more. So if you notice a little bit of bunching, don't worry too much. The weight of the robe will pull it down when we add on more rows at the bottom, but keeping your slip stitches loose will prevent that bunching from happening. Now we're making it to our end here. We're going to go through the full stitch for this last stitch, not the front loops and back loops. We're going to go under all of the loops. So we're going through the full stitch. Let me take this stitch marker out. Take this stitch marker out, because we're going to do a full single crochet into this last stitch. Full single crochet, chain 1, chain 2, cut off the tail. And we're going to pull that through and pull it tight to knot it. And then we're going to weave this end in. So this is what the full seam looks like. Move these out the way. Here's what the full seam looks like. Now you see how the tops of the clusters are joined together. So it looks like they are together. When you add some tension here it pulls apart a little bit. I really love how this looks because it looks like a spine to me, so I often call it the spine of the robe. Looking at the front now, what you'll notice, the way the front post trebles are joined, it pulls the fabric together, so you will see some pulling in certain areas. It is perfectly fine. Please don't worry about that. The weight of the robe when you're done is going to stretch it out. So we're going to add rows on here to the bottom, and we're going to make this longer. Now I turn the work around. So this is the bottom, and we're only focusing on adding rows along the bottom. So now that the piece is longer, we're going to find this bottom corner. Let me flip it back around. Here is one bottom corner. Here's the other bottom corner. This is where we're going to add on our next color. So we're going to do a cluster in this corner. Make a slip knot here. Put the yarn on our hook. And we're going to go into this chain 2 space. So we're going to put the hook through that chain 2 space, and we're going to pull up a loop, and we're going to do either our chain 2 or our standing double crochet. I'm going to do my standing double crochet here. Pull through. I'm going to go through this bar here, pull up a loop, pull through both. Now I'm going to do another double crochet, and my last double crochet here, work this tail in with that stitch. So this is my first cluster. Pull this tail out the way. I'm going to deal with that later. Now we're going to do our front post treble crochet clusters. So here's the first double crochet, and here is the treble into that middle double crochet below. And we're going to close out with another double crochet. And we're going to continue to just do this all the way around this bottom edge. So initially, when we were working on the body, we were going around the entire body, which included the bottom edge. Now we're only working along this bottom edge, and we're making the robe longer. So when we're looking at our robe measurements, this is where I had 60 inches, and that's measuring from the top of the shoulders all the way down to the bottom. So I'm actually going to want to work to about 58 inches, because when I add my moss stitch border, it's going to add on about another inch or two of length, and I don't want it dragging on the ground. I want it just at my ankles when I'm done with my robe. So we're going to continue to work along this bottom edge here until we get to the middle where the seam is. So I want to show you what we're going to do once we get to that seam. So let's meet at the middle. Here we are at the middle. So you'll notice that there are two chain 2 spaces that are next to each other. We're going to do 2 clusters in here. So get this out the way. We're going to start with 1 double crochet, 2 double crochets, and 3 double crochets. We're going to go to the other side into that other chain 2 space. We're going to do 1 more cluster, 2 and 3. So that's all we're doing with the middle, that seam area, is we're just going to add those 2 clusters in there. Moving forward, it created that gap where once we start using the base color on the wrong side, we'll just do a double crochet cluster into that gap, and we'll continue to go on and create our rows like that. So as you see, I'm continuing to go forward with my front post treble crochets now, and now I'm closing this out with my double crochet, and I'm just going to keep going forward with these clusters. We're now at the end of this row, so I'm going to do my last cluster here, which is a front post cluster around the stitch down here. 3, double crochet, and now I'm going to do one more double crochet cluster into this chain 2 space. 1, 2, and 3. Now I'm going to chain 2, 1, 2, and I am just gonna fasten off. I'm gonna cut my tail, pull the tail through, and I'm gonna pull this knot. So we are good, and I'm gonna weave this in at the end. Now I'm just gonna show you one more row. I'm adding on my base color, so I'm working on the wrong side of my work. I am starting with a double crochet on the edge here, and I'm going to create that space opening to go into. So as you can see, I'm going into this first stitch here. I'm going to go in, pull up a loop. I'm going to yarn over, move my tail out the way, yarn over, pull through 1, pull through 2. I'm going to go through this bar, yarn over, pull through 1, pull through 2. So that's my first stitch. Again, you can start with a chain 2. I'm going to go into that space between the clusters, and now I'm just going to start doing my double crochet clusters into these spaces. So again, you have that space at the beginning where you're going to do a front post treble cluster when you start that next row. So make sure you keep that, otherwise it's going to start tapering because you're going to skip a cluster at the end. But let's work our way through, and we're going to continue doing these clusters all the way to the end. I am going to add on this next color and just talk you through what some of the next steps are for this project. This part that we're going into right now, again, we're adding on length to the entire robe. So this is going to be how long the whole robe is. I'm going to keep adding on rows until I get to about 57 or 58 inches long, because I want to again leave some room for that moss stitch border. I like a thicker border. You can make, when we get to the border, you can make it as thick or as thin as you want. You might want to just do 2 rows of moss stitch. You might want to do 10 rows of a moss stitch. I like a thicker border, so once we get to that part, I'll talk you through how to do that, what to look out for, and especially once we get to the hood, because the hood is going to be a little tricky. I add more rows to the hood than I do the rest of the body. So we're going to keep doing these rows. We're going to do a row of color on the right side. We're going to do a row of the base color on the wrong side until we get to the length that we want. Part 3 of this tutorial will be putting on the hood. So once we're done with the length, we're going to start working on the hood, and the hood can be tricky. So we're going to spend an entire tutorial just focusing on the hood, and then talking just a little bit about what to expect when we get to the moss stitch border. I hope this tutorial is serving you well and easy to follow. Please, again, this is my first full tutorial that I've ever done, and I welcome any feedback that you have for me. Let me know in the comments below how I could have done some things better. If there's anything that's missing that you would have liked to have had included, please let me know, and hopefully I'll be able to fix it for the next tutorial. Keep those creative loops going. I am really looking forward to seeing how you all finish this project. I want to mention quickly here as I'm showing off, once we get to the middle seam, you'll notice that there aren't front post trebles to go into below, so you'll want to go into the middle double crochet of the cluster below. So you're not going to skip it. You're going to keep working through, and you're going to do treble crochets into those middle double crochets into the cluster below. I'll show you quickly here as we've gotten to that point now. Let me finish this treble cluster here. Do a double crochet. And now we're moving on to this middle seam part. I'm going to do a double crochet first into that opening space. Now I'm going to do a front post treble into the double crochet, the middle double crochet of the cluster below. Do a double crochet to close that cluster, and then I'm just going to repeat that on the other side of the seam. So nothing too special here, just continuing our front post treble crochet clusters. So again, I want to thank you. Please keep those creative loops going, and I can't wait to see how these turn out. I am so excited to see what you all do. Thank you, and I will see you next week.